There are a bunch of cities I've played in. I just separated my poker stats up through the day I hit 10,000 hours by city. This first page is Vegas. You see on the left a bunch of Aria. You know, it's alphabetical by room right now. Aria, and eventually down to a few sessions at the Wynn. Oklahoma is just WinStar. There's some 1-2 and some 1-3. Wisconsin is just Potawatomi in Milwaukee. Maryland, I'm splitting into two regions just because they're so far apart. Southern Maryland is just MGM National Harbor. Northern Maryland is a bunch at the Horseshoe Baltimore and a bunch at Maryland Live. They're only about 10 miles apart. Iowa is just the Horseshoe Council Bluffs. And Atlantic City is mostly Harrah's Atlantic City and Borgata. The Rio is leaking. Classic the Rio. So there have been about 7 cities that I've played a lot of poker. I think the smallest sample is about 425 hours. So here is how much I've made by city. In Southern Maryland, just MGM National Harbor in Oxon Hill, Maryland, outside Washington, D.C. I played there a lot one summer. $10,199 in about 425 hours, which is about $24 per hour. Most of it was when the room was downstairs. I thought there was great energy. There was a lot of noise from the table games. A lot of people walked by who, didn't plan on playing poker that night. I was actually there the day we moved from downstairs to upstairs. Now it's on the second floor. Basically the second floor is just poker. I think it's so much worse because no one walks by casually and there's not noise from other things. There's a few slot machines around, not nearly what there was downstairs. I was there. We were playing and they started taking chairs away and bringing them upstairs, and at one point said, "You're done playing downstairs, go upstairs, same seats, table whatever, table 4, and keep playing." It is a lot worse upstairs than downstairs, but the bulk of that was downstairs, 24 an hour, although it is the smallest sample size. Atlantic City, which was for the most part one summer, $8,013 over about 570 hours, which is about $14.05 per hour. Something else in addition to the sample size to think about is that this, so far, it was just summers. Summers could be better. We never know the reasons, but I think a lot of people who take poker very seriously go to Vegas for the summer. It leaves the player pool worse players overall. The average player is worse. Also, I think people have more free time. Not that everyone is like a student or a professor or works in a school system, but people during the summers, even if they work, all year round, just seem to have their time off in the summer. So Atlantic City was a few more hours, and it was very close to my lifetime average, $14.05 an hour. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, at Potawatomi, I made $13,463 over about 623 hours, which is between $21 and $22 per hour. I played well. That was the first place I played live. I had 4 Foxwood sessions in my life, and after that, about my next 600 hours were when I lived in Wisconsin. I did play well. I do now understand how good things were going for me in addition to that. I remember a hand with an overpair. I knew I wasn't folding, but I also knew I wasn't going to win every single time. I felt like I was going to win about 3/4 of the time. But on the turn, I hit top set, so I had the nuts, and we got all in, and there was no doubt anymore. I remember another hand around that era. I had top pair, and the same thing. I wasn't folding, but I also knew I could be beat. Well, I turned trips and rivered the nut flush, so that left no doubt in my mind that I was going to win that hand. There were a few things like that. I remember barreling hard with an open-ender once, actually twice now that I think about it, and hitting the straight on the river. Just a lot of things went my way. It was also a lot of weekends, which it's, debatable whether weekends or weekdays are better. I know almost everyone in the world will say weekends are better. It's possible, not sure, but I was playing mostly weekends in Wisconsin. So that was a very high hourly, over about 623 hours. At WinStar in Thackerville, Oklahoma, beautiful Thackerville, Oklahoma, I've made $9,423 over about 720 hours, which is about $13.09 an hour. I don't have the number right now, but I will put up on the screen how much I made per hour in 2019, because I played there a lot summer 2019 after Atlantic City. That was the same summer. And then I played there for about 7 weeks last year during last year's not public, but 1,000 hours in 100 days challenge. About the first half was in WinStar. It's a much different place now that the clubs have opened in Texas. The clubs existed in 2019. People were a little unaware and or scared about, you know, the legality and safety of it. So a lot of people from Dallas were still driving up to WinStar. Last year, I was there 7 weeks. Much fewer people are driving up from Dallas to play there. I still like it. It's just not what it was. I would say every casino I've ever played poker in my life, that's probably in the top half still. It's just a lot worse than it used to be now that all the clubs are opening in Texas. I've made $13,543 in 1,050 hours in Northern Maryland. So that's Maryland Live in Hanover, Maryland, and the Horseshoe Baltimore in Baltimore, which is about $12.90 per hour, which is surprisingly less than my lifetime hourly. I know at the Horseshoe Baltimore, I make about $18 an hour. In my opinion, that is a much, much better place to play in that area of Maryland. Maryland Live is very well run. There's 2 floors, there's a lot of tables, the floor are great. There are people who are like chip runners slash, you know, the people you go to for table changes, slash doing the board. Those, for the most part, are great. The dealers are taught very well. I don't like the promotions. I think they've gone very overboard with the promotions over there. I remember, because I played in Northern Maryland, those 2 casinos, for about 83 days straight at the end of 2020 when things were reopening out of quarantine. I remember at one point, if you hit a Royal, I think you got paid $1,500. I think there was a stretch where the first 15 minutes of the hour was a $500 high hand, the next 15-minute period of the hour, $500, the third 15-minute period, $500, and the final 15-minute period of the hour was $1,000. So if you hit a Royal, you're going to win the high hand. In addition to that, you would get paid the Royal bonus for $500. So if you hit a Royal at the right time, you would get $1,500. I felt that it was literally attracting people who would not be playing poker at all if not for the promo. So people are sitting there basically just waiting for Royals. In the Horseshoe Baltimore, promos worked the opposite. We had both places on Thursday. It was $500 high hand every 15 minutes. But the people willing to play downtown at the Horseshoe Baltimore, it brought people out to play who wouldn't normally be playing, but they were like making time to play, and they played a lot of hands. They were also very social. The games were fun in addition to being good based on the hands being played. At Maryland Live, I felt like it was bringing in a lot of people who, with no promos, would just be sitting at home. With these promos, came out to just sit there and wait for Royals. So it's not that you can't win. I think I made like $4 an hour there at the end of 2020, but it takes a much different style than I would like to play to win. And even if you're great at that style, when you're winning by forcing people to fold, you're just not going to win as much. You know, when you're winning by people calling you and having worse, you win a lot at a time. When you're winning by getting people to fold, you win a little at a time. And it's just, I've done it. There was a stretch in Vegas where I played loose aggressive for about 8 months. It was like really exhausting and nerve-wracking, very, very volatile. And you barely even make that much more. But I did it because I felt like the games in Vegas called for it at the time. I would really prefer to like travel and just find a better game and play more of a tight aggressive style than stay where I am and play loose aggressive. So when I started realizing Maryland Live was like that, I just started playing a lot more at the Horseshoe Baltimore. So That's it. Northern Maryland, $12.90 per hour. I've made $25,645 in 1,866 hours in Council Bluffs, Iowa. That's $13.74 per hour. I lived in Nebraska for 3 years, so I would drive the 55 miles and play at the Horseshoe Council Bluffs a lot. Interesting. Those games were very loose, very aggressive. I was like I always felt the need to be super focused. Like I couldn't ever be on autopilot. But I did pretty well in those games. Not quite in my lifetime hourly, but I did very well, which included 2 stretches where basically everything that could go wrong did go wrong. It's an interesting mix. I felt like that was the city more than any other I've ever played in, where a lot of the players I felt away from the table at home were trying to improve their poker. But it wasn't like during the series where people come to Vegas and only talk about PO Solver. It was social, it was fun, pots were big. You could even find a pretty good game in the late morning. The older crowd, it wasn't like the older crowd in Vegas. In addition to that, we had a mix of blue collar and white collar people in that area. So the people who, worked in, like finance or like owned their own business, they didn't really change their schedule. They wouldn't come play all-nighters. If they came to play, they would just take the day off work and play from like 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and keep their exact same schedule, just play poker instead of work. So you could have some great games during the day, and then of course you would get some blue-collar people and a few students, just some people who had weekends off and have great games at night also. It was pretty rare for there to be like a dead time of day in Council Bluffs. So I really enjoyed it. The only problem with Council Bluffs was if you're really, really into hours, there could be weeks where it's tough to get like a full 70. Sometimes we would just be playing the last table of the night. We would play 3-handed for a while. There was one night we played 3-handed for it felt like 3 hours. And one of those 3 guys went to smoke constantly, so a lot of it was heads up. There were other times where we were 3-handed, the third guy left, and I would ask the other guy, do you want to play heads up? Which they would let you finish the down. They weren't going to let you play heads up all night because the floor and the dealer get to go home if the room goes dark. So it could be tough to play like a full 10 hours every single day if that's what you're trying to do, which is what I try to do now. Although there are, the College World Series comes to Omaha. There were 2 tournament stops. One was a World Series of Poker circuit. I forget the series, the other stop of the year. But we had 2 tournament stops each year. There are times where it's busier than usual, but I would say your typical week, there's like 55 to 65 hours of poker you could play. It would be tough to play 70 plus every week. And my lowest hourly by city, it is right where I am right now. $56,463 over 4,459 hours for $12.66 per hour. There's a lot I like about Vegas. A lot of it has to do with the expenses. I just booked a week at the Rio, I think the first week of May, and 5 nights is $37. So there's a ton I like about Vegas. You can keep your expenses very, very low. In addition to that, no state income tax for those of us who actually report our poker income on our taxes. There's a ton I like about it. It's transient in a good way sometimes, that you see people like for 3 days and then don't see them again, or maybe you see them the same time every single year, people who come like just for the Super Bowl weekend or something like that. There's a lot of like games. MGM has like a game room type area. Bellagio and Aria used to. They closed during Corona. Bally's in the basement has a Pac-Man and mini golf. There's a ton I like about this place. It is my least favorite poker, actually. It could be very social, that could make up for it, but based on the hands you see played, it is the most difficult poker I've ever played in my life and the tightest. People around here have gotten very, very good at not bleeding their money away. If you could make it in Vegas playing poker, you can make it anywhere. So the $12.66 is not an amazing hourly. If that's all I made for my entire life, that's still decent. But when you factor in how fun it is, the fact that any week you want, you could play 80 hours if you felt like it. Those hours exist out there right now. and the fact that it's so easy to keep your expenses so low. I can't go back and play WinStar. It is way different now that many people in Dallas are playing in the clubs and they're not driving up to Thackerville, Oklahoma anymore. There's nowhere to stay though. You occasionally get 2 nights comped in the casino, and the motels along the interstate, it's really tough. That's why I left last year. I planned on staying there for the entire 100 days and left halfway through, because in addition to the motels being like dirty, not dangerous, but they're dirty, it's tough to get them for less than like $90 a night a lot of the time. It's just a really tough place based on expenses to stay. Maryland is okay if you do Airbnb. AC, you could do a mix of hotels and Airbnb, or you could get a place for like a short term. In Vegas, it's great. Sunday through Thursday, you could get very cheap nights at Caesars properties for being diamond, and at some MGM properties, mainly Luxor and Excalibur, for being gold. There's so many Airbnbs around here, the competition keeps the price fairly low. There's a lot I like about this, but the poker is the most difficult and the tightest. So if you're going to come to Vegas and play, be prepared for that. So there it is, $12.66 an hour in Las Vegas. Most hours, biggest sample.